We tend to judge people based on what we see, not who they are. We sort them into boxes by their age, their gender, the color of their skin. But what happens when those judgments are completely, shatteringly wrong? This is a story about a little girl's pride, a police officer's prejudice, and a mother who commands respect without saying a single word. What happens when a cruel laugh is met with the quiet authority of a true hero? You're about to find out. The laugh was the worst part. It wasn't a friendly chuckle. It was sharp and ugly, like broken glass, and it sliced right through the happy noise of the community fair. 10-year-old Zoe flinched as if she'd been hit. "Special Forces?" Officer Miller repeated, his words dripping with disbelief. He nudged his younger partner, Officer Davis. "Hear that, Davis? This little girl says her mom is in the Special Forces. The Green Berets." He let out another bark of laughter, this one louder. A few people, drawn by the sound, started to turn their heads. Zoe's face burned hot with humiliation. Her hands, which had been waving with so much pride just a moment before, balled into fists at her sides. "It's true," she said, her voice small but firm. "My mom's a soldier. She's a hero." Officer Miller leaned down, getting uncomfortably close. His smile wasn't a smile at all, it was a sneer. "A hero? Kid, let me give you some advice. It's not nice to tell tall tales, especially to a police officer. My own brother tried out for Special Forces, washed out in the first week. It's the toughest training in the world. They don't just let anyone in." He glanced around at the watching faces playing to his small audience. "And they certainly don't let, well, you know." He didn't have to finish the sentence. The meaning hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Zoe's eyes welled up with angry, hurt tears. She had been so proud. Her teacher asked everyone to prepare a speech for the fair about their hero. While other kids talked about superheroes or movie stars, Zoe only had one person in mind, her mom. She had stood on that little wooden stage and talked about her mother's courage, her dedication, and the letters she sent from faraway places that smelled like dust and adventure. And now, this man in a uniform was turning her pride into a public joke. He was making her feel like a liar. It had all started so well. The sun was out, the air smelled like popcorn, and the park was buzzing with families enjoying the town fair. Zoe was nervous but excited, clutching the note cards with her neatest handwriting. When her name was called, she walked up, took a deep breath, and began. "My hero is my mom, Lena Washington," she started, her voice getting stronger with every word. "She's not a singer or an actress. She's a soldier in the United States Army. She's in something called Special Forces, which means she's one of the bravest and smartest people there is. She helps people in dangerous places and protects our country." She spoke for 3 minutes, her heart swelling with love. She talked about the medals her mom kept in a special box, the pictures of her in uniform, and how her mom could do 100 push-ups without even breaking a sweat. When she finished, a nice round of applause followed. Zoe beamed, feeling 10 feet tall. But as she stepped down from the platform, the trouble started. Officer Miller and Officer Davis were standing nearby, supposedly keeping the peace. Miller, holding a paper bag of donuts, had overheard the end of Zoe's speech, and a smirk crawled across his face. "That's quite a story you got there, little one," he said, his voice just loud enough to be noticed. Zoe looked up at him, her smile faltering. "It's not a story, it's true." That's when he laughed. Just a short, dismissive puff of air. "Right, and I'm the King of England," he said, taking a big bite of a jelly-filled donut. "Your mom, huh? Special Forces?" He looked her up and down, a clear, judging gaze that made Zoe feel tiny. He saw a little black girl with braided hair and a pink t-shirt. His mind, clouded by years of bias, had already decided. The story she was telling just didn't compute with his version of the world. Women, and especially black women, weren't commandos in his imagination. They were nurses or clerks, maybe they drove trucks. They weren't the elite. "She is," Zoe insisted, her voice rising. "She's a major. She's been all over the world." Officer Miller wiped jelly from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. "A major? Oh, a major now. The story gets bigger and bigger. Listen, kid, I'm sure your mom is a nice lady. Maybe she works on the base as a secretary. No shame in that. But you shouldn't go around making up things like this. It's called stolen valor." It's a serious thing. His partner, Officer Davis, shifted uncomfortably. Miller, come on, he muttered. She's just a kid. It's for a hero speech. Let it go. But Miller was enjoying himself, feeling a weird sense of power in setting the world right according to his own view. No, it's a teachable moment, he said, waving Davis off. He turned back to Zoe, his voice dripping with fake sympathy. Look, I get it. You want your mom to be a superhero. But real heroes are guys like me, patrolling the streets. Or guys like my brother, who actually had the guts to try for the big leagues. Your mom is probably nice. Let's just leave it at that. The small crowd was growing. Phones were coming out. People were starting to film. The humiliation wasn't private anymore. It was becoming a public spectacle. A single hot tear escaped and ran down Zoe's cheek. She angrily wiped it away. She would not cry in front of him. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Her mother was brave, so she had to be brave too. Seeing that tear was like blood in the water for Officer Miller. It emboldened him, confirming in his mind that he'd won, that her story was falling apart. Instead of backing down, he doubled down. "Aw, look at that," he said with fake pity. "Now she's crying, see? This is what happens when little stories get out of hand. It's okay, kid. No one's gonna hold it against you." "I'm not crying," Zoe snapped, her voice thick. "And it's not a story. My mom is coming to pick me up right after this. You'll see. You'll all see." That was a mistake. The challenge in her voice lit a new spark of arrogance in Miller's eyes. A 10-year-old girl was publicly defying him. "Oh, she's coming to pick you up, is she?" Miller said, a cruel grin spreading across his face. "Is she flying in on a stealth helicopter? Rappelling down from the clock tower? That's what special forces do, right? Or is she just gonna drive up in her minivan?" Some onlookers tittered nervously. A few looked uncomfortable, but the uniform gave him an aura of authority nobody wanted to question. Officer Davis tried again, stepping closer to his partner. "Miller, seriously, enough. We're supposed to be on patrol, not harassing a child. Let's go." Miller shrugged him off, his eyes locked on Zoe. "In a minute. I want to see this through. This is about honesty and respect for the uniform." He puffed out his chest. "My uniform. And the uniform she's pretending her mom wears." Then he did something that went from cruel to just plain sadistic. He unclipped the radio from his shoulder. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7, he said, his voice booming with fake officialdom. "We've got a situation at the fair. A possible case of fantastical storytelling. A young lady is claiming her mother is a high-ranking member of Army Special Forces, requesting backup in case the major arrives, and we need to verify her credentials." He let go of the button with a smirk. He knew dispatch would be confused, but it wasn't for them, it was for the crowd. It was for Zoe. It was a performance, using the very tool of his job to belittle a child. Zoe stared, her mouth open. This couldn't be happening. It felt like a nightmare. Her pride in her mother, the purest feeling she knew, was being laughed at by this horrible man. The stares from the crowd felt like tiny needles. She could hear their whispers. That poor little girl. Well, the officer has a point. It does sound a bit fetched. Still, he's being awfully mean. Zoe looked around, pleading for someone, anyone, to believe her. She saw only conflicted or indifferent faces and felt totally alone. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to channel her mother's strength. Her mom always said courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about doing what's right, even when you are. "You're a bully," Zoe said, her voice trembling but clear. "You think your badge and gun mean you can say whatever you want. But you're wrong. My mom is more of a hero than you'll ever be." The direct hit wiped the smirk off Miller's face, replaced by a flash of anger. "What did you just say to me?" he growled, taking a step forward. The mood shifted from mockery to menacing. "You heard me," Zoe said, standing her ground, even as her knees knocked together. "All right, that's it," Miller said, his voice low and dangerous. "You've got a real mouth on you, you know that? When this mystery mom of yours shows up, I'm going to have a serious talk with her about teaching her kids some respect for law enforcement." He gestured to the crowd. "Everyone here is a witness. This child is being disrespectful and making false claims. I'm just doing my job." He was painting himself as the patient victim. But his eyes were cold. He was a bully who had been challenged, and now he had to win. The tension was at its peak. The whispers had stopped. Everyone was watching, waiting, and in that heavy silence, a sound cut through the air. The firm, solid, authoritative sound of a car door closing. It wasn't a loud noise, but in the dead silence of the park, it was as sharp as a starter pistol. Every head turned. A sleek black government sedan was parked at the curb. It was immaculate, a stark contrast to the family minivans around it. The driver's side door opened and a boot hit the pavement. Not a sneaker or a sandal. A military-issued desert combat boot, perfectly laced. The boot was followed by a leg in crisp camouflage. A figure emerged, unfolding to her full height, with a disciplined grace. A bystander's phone, still recording, panned up slowly. Past the trousers tucked into the boots. Past the service jacket, decorated with a constellation of ribbons and badges that even a civilian knew meant something serious. Past the shoulders, straight and squared. Finally, the camera found her face. She was a black woman, with sharp, intelligent features, her hair pulled into a tight regulation bun. Her expression was calm, but her eyes were taking in everything. The crowd, the two cops, and in the middle of it all, her daughter. This was Major Lena Washington, and she was in full uniform. The effect was instantaneous. A wave of silence rolled through the crowd. Every phone was now raised, not for the drama, but to document something incredible. Officer Miller's jaw went slack. The swaggering bully from a moment ago vanished, replaced by a man who looked like he'd just seen a ghost. His brain scrambled to connect the woman before him with the crude caricature he'd been mocking. It just didn't add up. His laughter, his radio call, it all now seemed like the babbling of an absolute fool. Officer Davis just stared, his eyes wide with awe and a dawning horror at what his partner had just done. Zoe's face, though, transformed. The second she saw her mother, the tension drained out of her. A single relieved sob escaped her lips. The hero from her speech was real. She was here. Major Washington closed the car door with a quiet click. She didn't look at Miller. She didn't look at the crowd. Her eyes were fixed on one person. With calm, measured steps, she walked toward her daughter. The crowd parted for her like she was royalty. The only sound was the steady crunch of her boots on the dry ground, each step a hammer blow to Officer Miller's crumbling world. Section 4. Falling Action. The Confrontation and Realization. Major Washington walked directly to Zoe, ignoring everyone else. She knelt on one knee, bringing herself to her daughter's eye level. Her movements were precise, yet filled with a tenderness that defied her formidable appearance. "Zoe," she said, her voice low and calm, "I heard you gave a speech. Sorry I'm late. Are you all right?" Zoe threw her arms around her mother's neck, burying her face in the uniform's stiff fabric. "Mommy," she whispered, the sobs she'd held back finally breaking free. "He wouldn't believe me. He called me a liar. He laughed." Major Washington held her tightly, stroking her hair. She was a mother first, a soldier second, assessing the damage not on a battlefield, but in her child's heart. After a moment, she gently pulled back, wiping a tear from Zoe's cheek. "Courage isn't the absence of fear, remember?" she said softly, quoting a line from one of her letters. "It's standing up for what's true, even when your voice shakes. And you have more courage than anyone I know." She gave Zoe's shoulder a reassuring squeeze and then stood up. Slowly, deliberately, she turned to face Officer Miller. The air crackled. The crowd held its breath. Major Washington's eyes, so warm for her daughter just a second ago, were now like steel. They weren't angry or emotional. They were analytical, assessing, and utterly in command. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Officer," she said, her tone level and dangerously quiet, "I believe you had some questions about my credentials and some comments about my daughter." Miller flinched like he'd been poked. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He swallowed hard, a sudden sweat shining on his face. He stammered, his eyes darting from the major's face to the ribbons on her chest and back again. "Let me help you," Major Washington continued, her voice unwavering. "You are Officer Miller. Your partner is Officer Davis. You seem to believe that a person's appearance, their gender, or their skin color disqualifies them from serving in an elite capacity." Her gaze hardened. You also seem to believe it's appropriate to use your authority to publicly humiliate a 10-year-old child. Each sentence was delivered with surgical precision, cutting right through Miller's bluster. No, ma'am, that's not it at all. Miller finally squeaked out. It was a misunderstanding. I was just joking around. I didn't mean any disrespect. Joking? The word was quiet, but it landed like a slap. You think my service is a joke? My daughter's pride in her mother's a joke? She took one step closer. Miller took one step back. Let me tell you what isn't a joke. This uniform. The flag on my shoulder. The sacrifices made by the men and women I serve with. Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. They are patriots. Something you clearly know nothing about. She paused. I have served for 18 years. I have led soldiers in combat. I have earned every ribbon on this uniform for actions you can't even imagine. And I have done it all while raising a daughter who is braver and more honorable than you've been for the last 10 minutes. The silence that followed was deafening. Miller just stood there, his face a mask of shame and fear. He looked to his partner for help, but Davis just looked away, disgusted. Just then, a police sergeant pushed his way through the crowd, alerted by a bystander or Miller's own unprofessional radio call. What in the world is going on here, Miller? The sergeant demanded. Officer Davis stepped forward. Sergeant, Officer Miller was questioning the claims of this young girl about her mother's military service. The sergeant looked at Major Washington, his eyes widening with immediate recognition and respect. He straightened his posture. Ma'am, he said with a respectful nod. He turned back to Miller, his face turning red. You did what? Sir, Miller began, but the sergeant cut him off. I heard your transmission, Miller. I thought it was a prank. Are you telling me you stood here, in uniform, and harassed a child and this decorated officer? The sergeant looked like he was about to explode. In my office, now. You and me are going to have a long, long talk about your future on this force. Davis, take over. My profound apologies, ma'am. There's no excuse for this. Utterly defeated, Miller hung his head and followed the sergeant away. The walk of a man who knew his career was, for all intents and purposes, over. We see stories like this happen far too often, where prejudice causes real pain. But stories of courage can inspire real change. If you believe heroes come in all shapes, sizes, and colors, and that respect is earned through character, not stereotypes, subscribe and share this story. Let's spread the message that true strength is about how we treat each other. As Miller was led away, a few people started clapping, then a few more, until it grew into a wave of applause. It wasn't for the drama, but for the quiet, powerful woman who had defended her daughter's honor, and for the little girl who was brave enough to speak the truth. Major Washington paid the crowd no mind. She turned back to Zoe, her expression softening again. She knelt down, taking both of her daughter's hands. Are you really okay? Zoe nodded, a real smile finally returning. I am now. You were amazing, Mom. Just like in my speech. No, Major Washington replied, a proud smile on her own lips. You were the amazing one. You stood your ground. You were strong. I am so, so proud of you. She stood, took Zoe's hand, and they walked back toward the black sedan, leaving the crowd and the fallout behind them. They walked hand in hand, a mother and daughter whose bond was just made even stronger. The setting sun cast their long shadows ahead, the silhouette of a soldier and the small, brave girl she protected, both at home and abroad. As they got into the car, Zoe looked back. The crowd's faces had changed. They had seen prejudice brought low and honor stand tall. It was a lesson they wouldn't forget. And for Zoe, the pride she felt for her mother was now brighter and more unshakable than ever, a beacon of truth that no amount of laughter could ever put out. In a world that's so quick to judge, it's worth remembering, a person's worth isn't defined by our perceptions. It's defined by their character and their courage. True heroes don't always make a grand entrance. Sometimes they just show up when they're needed most.